Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can analyze the interview that George Stephanopoulos did of Mary Trump. Other questions here include, is Mary Trump credible or biased? And if her statements were true, would they explain how somebody could become narcissistic? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoy this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. Mary Trump is the niece of Donald Trump. She was interviewed by ABC News in July of 2020. In this interview, she talked about a number of topics related to the president and her book about Donald Trump titled Too Much and Never Enough. I will attempt to restrict my analysis to the information that was presented in the interview for the most part. The interview kind of jumped around a bit. It wasn't really logically sequenced. So I'm going to organize things a little bit better so they flow kind of through this video. Now, the interview starts with Mary Trump talking about the relationship between her grandfather, Fred Trump Sr., her father, Fred Trump Jr., and her uncle, Donald Trump. Fred Trump Sr., who I'll just refer to as Fred Sr., was an exceedingly wealthy businessman who died in 1999. Fred Trump Jr., who I will call Fred Jr., was an airplane pilot who died in 1981. And of course, I'm pretty sure most people know who Donald Trump is. At the time of making this video, he's the President of the United States. Mary makes a few observations about the relationship between those three men and other family members. Mary Trump said that Donald Trump and her father were essentially raised without love, attention, and support. Donald was always trying to please Fred Sr. She said that Fred Sr. was a sociopath who had no empathy. He was incredibly driven, and he used people like pawns. Fred Sr. destroyed her father. Her father was a kind, caring, and sensitive person who just could not adapt to the harsh environment created by his father. Donald Trump, on the other hand, was able to adapt, and he became callous and cold in order to please his father, essentially learning from what happened to Fred Jr., his brother. So at first it sounds like she's saying that Fred Sr. destroyed Fred Jr. Her father was criticized for struggling with his alcohol use. He was treated like he was worthless, like he betrayed the family. He was disrespected by Fred Sr. and Donald. But then things kind of shift a bit, and she says that Donald Trump destroyed her father, and she can't let him destroy the country. She said that she draws parallels between how Donald Trump acted in the family unit and how he acts toward the United States. She said our society tends to elevate the wrong people. Now, it's hard to argue with that specific point as a general principle. We do see a lot of people elevated to high-status positions when there's no scientific evidence to support that transfer, that movement. It's something that's commonly done with celebrities of all types, including politicians. Mary reluctantly acknowledges that Donald Trump has been successful. She said on the surface, he has been successful. He is a wealthy businessman and the President of the United States. So separate of how she feels about how he accomplished that, that's usually considered fairly successful. If somebody's President of the United States, they've done something right in their life, one would think. Her standards are incredibly high if that doesn't impress her even a little bit. So here we see one of the many clues that Mary Trump may be a little biased. She really seems to have a problem with how he obtained that success. Through a mentality that says succeed at all costs, treat people like they're expendable, do not take responsibility, and winning is everything. She talked about how Trump really had access to his father's money. That's really how he became successful. So she kind of cast doubt about how much he had a hand in that. Like, was he really a self-made business person, or was he helped tremendously through the process? She questions if Donald Trump's children really love him under her definition of love. Now, in terms of what is exactly wrong with Donald Trump, according to Mary Trump, things get a little bit murky, in part because Mary Trump is a mental health professional and she didn't want to diagnose him. Now, she does back up a little bit from that no diagnosing stance by saying that other people have done it and Donald Trump is dangerous. So more or less, she left the door open for diagnosing, but she didn't do it. Here are a few things that she does suggest about Donald Trump, though, outside of the realm of diagnosing. She suggests that he has a restricted range of emotions. His father did not allow negative emotions. He was always about positivity. So essentially, Donald had his feelings invalidated as a child. She makes the claim that another person took Donald Trump's SATs. Now, she can't prove this, but she says she's 100% sure that she was told by people who knew this. Evidently, these people were alive at the time when this happened. That's what she said. Being alive is a start, but in order to obtain information about a specific event, more is required than simply being alive. It's like if the police were interviewing a man on the street about a robbery suspect who committed a crime a few blocks away. Is the man going to say, well, I didn't really get a good look at the guy, but I'm alive. Therefore, I can identify the suspect. Mary goes on to say that Donald did not see his brother in the hospital when his brother was dying. He has a great deal of superficial charm. Now, Mary has stated in other places that she believes that Donald has sociopathic tendencies. She mentioned sociopathy in reference to her grandfather in this interview, but I don't recall her specifically referring to Donald Trump as a sociopath. She said that Donald had a number of financial failures and has been less than honest with the government about his financial dealings. Mary talked about an incident that occurred when Trump was 7 years old. Her father dumped mashed potatoes on his head. Donald is not able to joke about this topic even now, so he has no sense of humor. Mary really seemed to get a special sense of joy in relating this particular story, so we see evidence of schadenfreude in this instance. Stephanopoulos talked about how people are saying Mary is really just trying to get her 15 minutes of fame, that she's lying for money. She said that if she wanted to get revenge, she would have done so 10 years ago. She was also involved in litigation with the Trump family over her inheritance. There was a non-disclosure agreement, which it seems like she is now violating. So what are my thoughts about this interview? Whenever somebody talks about politics, it's really a touchy subject. No matter what Mary Trump says, there is a percent of the population that will believe her and a percent of the population that will not believe her. So two groups in the population will simply jump to one camp or the other. The rest of the population will look at the situation and try to weigh the evidence. When somebody brings theories forward like this, the complex family dynamics and the mental health aspects, there are a number of questions that need to be asked. Did Mary Trump have special access to information? I think she did. She's Donald Trump's niece. Her father had dealings with him. It seems reasonable that she would know more about this situation than the average person. Does she have more of a reason to dislike Trump than the average citizen? I think overall she does. She was an outsider to that family, and it appears that she believes her father was not treated well by the family. So that's kind of a touchy issue for anyone. She said that she was disinherited, and this meant the same thing as the family not loving her. So to her, no money means no love. And of course, she litigated over that. So in a way, she was trying to use the courts to get love, right? The courts would give her money, and that's the same thing as love. An unusual strategy, but it shows the level of hurt and pain apparent in this situation. Is there clear evidence of bias outside of this, outside of all these feelings? She said she had to take Trump down, which is a lot different than saying, I wanted to objectively explore the evidence and see if I could draw logical conclusions. Does she have something to gain from saying something negative? This one seems fairly clear, although I guess to be fair, she has something to lose by saying something negative as well. Regardless of her level of access, did she add something to the conversation? I think she did here. The accusation about the SATs is really difficult to believe with just her word, but her insight into the invalidation of Donald Trump's feelings when he was a child and how Donald wasn't caring toward her brother, those do seem to add something to the discussion. The challenge with somebody like Mary Trump coming forward and talking about this is really about credibility. What she's saying may be true. It may not be true. The truth may be somewhere in the middle. But her status as his niece raises the concern that her view of what happened is distorted. Now, if all of her statements are true, this is a frustrating position for her because it's kind of like a mother who is the alibi witness for her son. There have been many cases like this. A man commits a crime and his only alibi witness is his mother. The mother's testimony is almost always dismissed out of hand. Certainly, though, much of the time, the mother was telling the truth. But there's a reason that testimony is not given hardly any weight. If there could be some independent corroboration of her claims, that would really be helpful considering how she has these strong emotions. Emotion is the enemy of logic. Sadly, in the area of politics, emotion almost always defeats logic. That brings me to the last question. If what Mary is saying is true and accurately described, would it explain how someone could become narcissistic? The answer here is yes. Donald needed to focus on the positive in relating to his father. He had to do what the father wanted. He needed to play according to the father's rules. In a sense, among other things, this is conditional love. To understand what this means, we have to take a look at attachment theory. Attachment theory can be divided up into secure and insecure attachment. There's really only one type of secure attachment, but there are a few types of insecure attachment. Now, attachment theory is vast, but I can sum it up here in just a few sentences. Secure attachment would be when somebody has a positive view of themselves and a positive view of the world. So everything's positive. Preoccupied attachment would be if somebody had a negative view of themselves and a positive view of the world. Dismissing attachment would be when somebody had a positive view of themselves but a negative view of others. And fearful attachment would be when somebody had a negative view of themselves and a negative view of the world. So everything is negative. If somebody is only given conditional love, then this could lead to a type of insecure attachment referred to as dismissing attachment. That's the one I talked about, where somebody has a positive view of themselves, but a negative view of the world. This style is characterized by restricted emotions, flat affect, downplaying the importance of close relationships, putting a strong emphasis on self-reliance and independence, and not being clear or trustworthy when discussing relationships, which in many ways matches what Mary Trump was describing. The dismissing attachment style could also be thought of as a type of avoidant attachment. It gets kind of confusing because there are many theories around attachment, and some of them use the same words to mean something different. Avoidant is one of those words that's used in many different ways. Avoidant attachment is associated with grandiosity, and grandiosity is associated with both grandiose narcissism and factor 1 psychopathy. Grandiose narcissism is characterized by a sense of entitlement, feelings of envy, fantasies of wealth and power, and arrogance. Psychopathy is characterized by superficial charm, a tendency to manipulate, and pathological lying. Grandiosity is not associated with sociopathy, a term that Mary used in another statement, like I mentioned. This is a common mistake that even mental health professionals tend to make. They use the word sociopathy when they probably meant psychopathy. Sociopathy is really quite different. It's characterized by impulsivity, irresponsibility, multiple criminal acts that start in one's adolescence, being disorganized, having a parasitic lifestyle, and having unrealistic long-term goals. One of the things that occurs to me here is when a counselor is dealing with somebody who says they want to be president someday, that's usually thought of as an unrealistic long-term goal, like you want to have a backup plan if that is your primary goal, but for a very few people, it is realistic. Now, it's worth noting that Mary Trump could have meant she believes Donald has both psychopathic and sociopathic characteristics, and she was simply using the word sociopathic for the sake of expedience. So, stepping back and looking at the interview, it was an interesting interview. Mary Trump's credibility is always going to be a question because of her relationship to Donald Trump, but we see some interesting potential insights into Donald Trump's early years. If you have any opinions or thoughts, please put them in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.